Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Yeshiva League Pass Face-off. I'm your host, Josh Cass, and we are sponsored by the Weiselberg Law Firm. For 16 years, you've entrusted Elliot with the growth and guidance of your kids, and now it's time to let him do the same for your family's most important asset, your home. Admitted in both New York and New Jersey, Elliot can help guide you through any residential or commercial purchase, sale, refinance, or lease with championship quality and award-winning care. If you're looking for your home or your commercial coach or new home is your goal, reach out to Weiselberg Law Real Estate Services today at 917-952-2597 or wiselawesc@gmail.com. Reminding everyone once again, that's the Weiselberg Law Firm. Please choose wisely. Today, everyone, we have, for the very first time on the podcast, Avidan Berman. He's always the director for Flatbush hockey in both middle school, junior varsity, and varsity there. And he's going to be featured in the junior varsity playoffs for the JV season. And that's right around the corner, which kind of gives you a hint to what we're talking about right now today, which is going to be the varsity playoff picture. So Avidan, welcome. We're glad to have you for the very first time.
Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to join you.
So to get right into it, I mentioned playoffs are right around the corner. And I think that we all know that, we didn't have this podcast last season. If we would have, there were a lot of matchups that we could have been talking about prior. And if that doesn't give away, what our focus of this episode is, I don't know what does. Obviously, it's going to be predictions. It's going to be breaking down teams, where we think they can go. It's going to be what we think is going to happen, and ultimately who we think has the potential to win this league and bring it all home. Avidan, I'm going to get right to the point. First of all, who's in the playoffs so far? I think that everyone needs to know we have our set bracket. All right. And to remind the viewers once again how the formatting of clinching a playoff spot worked again is last season, it is not the same way. It was top four seeds in each division made it in. There was a lot of controversy behind that with the fact that you had teams like Ramaz in the West who had a record of, I think, 8-6, which was better than the bottom two records among the teams that made the playoffs as the 3 and 4 seed in the East at, I think, like 6-6-2 and like 7-6-1 or something like that, them being in Magen David and Rambam last year. But this year, it's flipped around. The one seed in each division gets a playoff spot. They clinch. So the winner of each division clinches a spot. But after that, there are 6 wild cards. Any team can make it in. Doesn't matter if it's 6 teams in one division. Doesn't matter if it's split 3-3, 4-2, 5-1. No one cares. 6 wild cards, and the division winners are the teams making it in, which left a little bit of imbalance, I think, or a lot of people thinking there would be imbalance. And at one point, it looked like it could fall out that way with MTA, Kushner, Ramaz all fighting for playoff spots of their own. But ultimately, we did end up with 4 from the East and 4 from the West. Avidan, why don't you let us know? The elephant in the room is that Flatbush is out. They had a chance to take that last spot. Kushner is officially in. And right now, from the West, who do we have representing the varsity playoffs?
Yeah, so we have TABC, who they won. You're right, they won the division. Then you have Frisch, SAR, Kushner, and then over in the East we have DRS, YDE, Hank, and Hafter. And I think the whole story of the regular season was really interesting coming in, because especially coming towards the last days, right? Flatbush had 4 games in like a week or so, and they were able to pull up a big win against Ramaz, which I think I think that was a 50-50 game at best. And they pulled out a big win there, and then right, they come to Rambam, and then you guys over at Rambam were able to pull away with the tie, right, the 1-1 tie, and that put a big wrench in the whole Flatbush scenario, and it opened up the door for Kushner really to slide in. And right then, obviously, Flatbush comes in, beats Salmon Schefter, and Kushner takes care of what they have to do against MTA, getting their 2 wins, and then Flatbush has to play YDE. And that was honestly, it was a playoff game. It was a phenomenal game. Just, I'll be biased, but it was a really good game. And right, and YD was able to come up with it. Just a big win, great goal on in overtime to put away Flatbush. And yeah, and honestly, by the way, Kushner having fans at the game in Brooklyn was amazing. Like, really, really cool to have, where it was legitimately a playoff game.
Yeah. So I think that it should be looked upon right now. Let's go through. We already mentioned who's in the playoffs. In terms of where these teams fall out in the actual seeding, remember, even though each team that wins their division is theoretically the one seed of their division. It is seeded 1 through 8 among all 8 playoff teams. So just to break that down really quick, first we have TABC. They hold the top seed in the entire league with a 13-1 record. That one was a defeat that came, ironically enough, at home in their own gym against SAR in a game that ended 4-3. Close game back and forth. We'll talk about that eventually. Behind them, the one seed from the other division, and this is where some of the controversy comes into speaking about, or if you want to really, really harp on it, DRS. And not to say they had a weak record, they still won 11 games. They finished with a record of 11-2-0-1. However, not as good as the seed that is right behind them in the Frisch Cougars in third place overall. They have a record of 12-1-1. And there's a little bit of controversy saying that Frisch only is the 3 seed because they played in the West Division behind TABC, who only lost 1 game during the regular season. They beat Frisch twice. You got to give them credit for that. But Frisch beat DRS, the 1 seed in the other division, 4-0 in DRS. All right. To me, Frisch could have been the 2 seed. That's just the way it is. Statistically, the way this, that the playoffs were configured this year with the way each division winner gets one of the top 2 seeds, ultimately I think came back to bite them, in the backside a little bit. But ultimately speaking, they're a very, very respectable team. You can't look at them and say they're not top 2. I don't have faith in them. So they're at the 3 spot. In the 4 spot, and this is huge now, is YDE with that win over you guys on Tuesday night. There was, what, forget it. We'll get back to that. In 5th place, and this is where it gets interesting, we have SAR. SAR finishing 3rd in the West Division. In 6th place, we have the Hurricanes. In 7th place, the Hafter Hawks finishing with a record of 8-6. A lot of people didn't think they'd sneak into the playoffs at the start of the year with a younger team, but they managed to do so. And finally, the last spot, as we mentioned already, the Kushner Cobras. And the way it works is that it's a straight bracket. 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5. The 1 through 4 seeds each host the playoff games. Avidan, why don't you break us down? We'll go straight to the matchups right now.
Mhm.
And let's go to, I think that the most interesting one, debatably, in my opinion, at the very least, is the one that we're looking at with the 1 versus 8 in TABC Cushion. I just want to mention something that Elliot said last episode we had when we talked about the playoff push, saying you can't give TABC the quote unquote automatic over a team like Kushner because it doesn't matter. Kushner's the 8 seed. Sure, that is the case. And statistically, it may seem that they're the weakest link in the playoffs. They are going to be the easiest matchup for anyone. I don't think that's true. We've seen this team play close with SAR. I mean, they beat SAR. We've seen them play close twice with Frisch. We've seen them beat MTA. They beat you guys. You guys also had a very a tough schedule, but also not exactly a team you're looking at and say, oh wow, like they beat them. It doesn't mean anything. They played close with TABC earlier in the week on Sunday. I'm looking at this game and I say this is a game Kushner may steal from them. I don't think that'll happen. I would still take TABC here, but what are your thoughts on this game?
I mean, I think this is TABC's game to lose. I watched the game in TABC where TABC won 7-3. Um, and I just lost you on my screen. But I look overall at just the 2 different teams, and Kushner's a good team, so it's really no disrespect, right? But I do think that in this case, I think TABC just has a stronger all around team. I think that they know their gym really well, and that plays in the playoffs. Home field, also TABC fans show out. They do, and that's a game changer. You have the entire momentum from ball drop. So I do think TABC is the favorite there.
Yeah, and I would say once again, I do agree. However, I'm looking at this Kushner team and I'm saying, if they could get a bounce or two, and I'm not saying it's easy, but if they could manage to get a bounce or two, sometimes that's all it takes. They have guys at every position that can carry a load, if not the whole way through a game, then certainly partially through the game. Jordan Service is one of the top defensemen in the league this year.
Jordan Service was excellent in that game, by the way, in TABC. He was fantastic.
He's been outstanding
And
all
and
season.
Ku and it's not to say and Kushner did find holes in the TABC defense. Like, it's not like one goal wasn't like a great goal, but they found a spot, a hole in the TABC defense that they were able to exploit for 2 goals. The question is, could they keep TABC off the board? And that's gonna be the big, the really difficult part, I think for everybody really, is,
Right.
stopping TABC's offense.
Yeah. But, again, to throw back, Service is a top defenseman in the league. I wouldn't take a lot away from his partner, Zeke Rabinowitz, either, who's done a good job all season
Yep.
long. On top of that, you've got a very, very solid first line. Isaac Mendelson is obviously one of the top scorers in the league
Yeah.
this year. His line mate, Freddie Dresner's not so far behind him. And in goal, I think it's really slept on. But Ethan Hirschnov is not a guy that a lot of people look at as a goalie in this league who's going to steal you games. But he can perform. And he's performed well in big games when they've needed it in the past. He started pulling the reins a little bit towards the end of last season when Kushner got eliminated, but he played against top teams in the league. He played against TABC, played against Hank. They were both very, very strong opponents last year, and he almost won those games single handedly. I wouldn't put it past him to have an outstanding performance. This could be their last game. The seniors, we know, as we've just mentioned on this team, are going to show up and they're going to make it an interesting game. I wouldn't say that this is Kushner's game that, like they have it locked up, it's in the bag. Obviously, they're going to need to work for it. But with that being said, for being the 8th seed, I wouldn't give Kushner as much, or let me phrase that. I wouldn't take as much away from them as one might normally in a case where you've got the 1 seed versus the 8th seed. In terms of what makes TABC so dangerous, we already know Chaim Mermelstein's been the best goalie in the varsity league this year. Eitan Adler and Ryan Brandwine. That line on offense is just unstoppable. And Shea Fields and Matis Kraus are dominating this league as a line of juniors. And then obviously that defense is loaded with Moskov and Ryder and Kaiser, Mattel. The list goes on and on. I'm not, I think that's pretty much everything that goes into play here. And then obviously in the coaching matchup, no disrespect to Corey Cops and Nat Drews, but Mo Fuchs is, he's definitely the upper side of that matchup. I would certainly give TABC the nod if
Yeah.
I'm
I
picking.
think I think also comes into place TBC has more depth, but I will say,
Yeah,
if you're gonna name off Kushner players, you really can't leave out James Orbach. You just can't
absolutely.
do
And yeah,
it. Kid's
for
phenomenal,
sure.
10th grader, and he's
For sure.
phenomenal. Got to see him a bunch of times this year, whether it's at the preseason tournament in Flatbush or when we played them in November. Kid's excellent. But I will say, like, the one thing with every single matchup is that when you get to the playoffs, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah,
It really is. I could go through, there's so many examples, but even just a couple of years ago when, right before, right, like that COVID season, right before COVID, which got cut off, where Ramaz was the bottom seed and they went on an absolute run where they beat
yeah,
Frisch and they went all the way to the championship. They were going to play DRS, and that was going to be a great matchup because Ramaz's goalie was playing out of his mind. Um, I mean, so you really can't count anybody out. So, there's no, Kushner has plenty of really good players. They deserve to be there. Very good team. TBC is just a little bit stronger. So if we were, having like a fantasy matchup saying, oh, who trying to make predictions, yeah, you're going to lean towards TBC, but it's really no disrespect to anyone on Kushner.
yeah. Okay, so moving on, the next matchup, and this is a classic rivalry matchup. A lot of people probably have forgotten that this is going to be a matchup with the seeding playing into the scene here. But DRS Hafter, this is not your classic DRS Hafter playoffs, even championship matchup. We've seen that in the past, back in the 2015 championship game. DRS faced the Hafter Hawks in varsity. Here we're seeing a Hafter team that is much younger than the one DRS has. DRS, obviously, the 1 seed in the East versus the 4 seed in the East here. So we're these two teams know each other, and they played not too long ago. Also, this past or earlier this week in DRS, I believe on Monday night that game took place. And I think that it should be known that DRS, the first time they played Hafter, wiped the floor with them. That game was in Hafter. Keep in mind. Now that was early on in the year. This time around, DRS won 2-0, a place that they're notorious for being much better. Their crowd, like you mentioned, TABC's crowd shows up. DRS is not far behind them. Their fans show up for these big games, especially these rivalry games against a team that is contending for a playoff spot. And they're going to get that again. They're going to play Monday next week in DRS. Now, just to break this down a little bit, again, I believe that DRS could have potentially been slightly lower than the 2 seed if we would have not had a just each division winner. If we would have just gone straight 1 through 8 and like, the top 8 teams make it in and it's like in order of actual records here, then, like they'd still be a top 3 seed record wise, but they'd be behind Frisch. However, that being said, they're out of the picture here. DRS Hafter alone, I think that this is DRS's game to move on with. I think that they will also pull out with this one. However, this is also a matchup I'm looking at. I'm saying it's the second highest seed versus the second lowest seed, and it could potentially be a great game. And the answer to why I think that is, and you can probably agree with me, we had this debate just a couple short days ago. Sorry, not Ben, Max Newmark is playing like a star in varsity as a 10th grader this season. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Hafter like outplayed DRS last matchup, and what happened was, DRS's offense was just a little bit better than Hafter's. No, like that game, DRS played very well, but Newmark kept it a game, and Hafter wasn't exactly out of it. But I'm looking at this game and I'm saying, is this game, my question is this just going to be a game where, Hafter struggles to find ways to defend well or play strong offense against DRS, and it's just Newmark being pelted with shots standing on his head, and maybe if Hafter gets one, then that could be the game for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think this Hafner team reminds me most of that Ramaz team that we mentioned earlier that went on the run because they also had a 10th
Yeah.
grade goalie who's playing phenomenal and all that. I mean, Max could steal a game, like not even a question. Kid's really like when he's on his game, it's
He's tough
very,
to beat.
very difficult to beat. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they also got hot. Like you can't take the beginning of the season and compare it to the end of the season. Like we played
Yeah.
them right on that line where we took them to OT and then they beat us in OT. And after that, they basically went on a roll. Basically, from there, they were able to go and do all of that. Sorry, I just got to work a work thing. It's just coming in asking me to jump in a meeting. But in any case, so Max, so look, I think the problem that Hafter's going to have is we're going to be able to figure out how to get through DRS's defense. I mean, Lawrence is best defenseman in the league, one of, right? They're very, very strong. And then it's only a matter of time until Matlis and Grossman score. It just is. I think, it's really hard. It's really hard to put them against each other just because Hafter's so young and they're lacking the experience and they aren't the complete product that they're going to be in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So, or even next year. So right now, just has that. DRS also has the championship, right? Like their JV team last year went to the championship. They had a good, they had a decent run in the playoff. What they won a round in varsity last year, right? Or they made it
No,
to the
they
second
they
round.
lost. They lost to SAR in the first round last
Right,
year.
right, right. I remember that. But yeah, no, a lot of the score is from that 11th grade, and they have that experience of what to do in the playoffs, what you got to do to win. So Hafter's going to be fighting a really, really uphill battle. I think this is probably the one that I think is you're right, like the most misbalanced at times, but also the one that can also be the tightest just because of
Yeah.
what's going on in net.
Yeah, and again, you nailed it. DRS, I think, is not as well known for their offense this year as they've been well known for that defense. It's not necessarily the goaltending that's been the strongest piece of that team. When I'm saying that they're good at keeping teams off the board, don't get me wrong. It's been very solid. It's been fantastic. Austin and Morowitz have done a great job. They've both taken big strides this year. But again, I'm looking at this team and I'm saying they've got guys who are so tough to beat on the back end, and not even all of them play. I mean, like last year, Jake Frankel was a massive piece of that JV team. He was an alternate captain for crying out loud. And this year, I don't know that he's higher than third line on that team. Obviously, Lawrence is a big piece. Rothman's been a big piece for them. And on offense, you can't take away from Moshe Grossman and Mark Matlis. They've been a top line since pairing with each other at the start of the season. You know, on Hafter's side, and I think that says, there again a lot more players to talk about there. Just to give
Yeah,
a
I mean,
little bit.
there is also the fact that Grossman and Malice have been playing together since ninth grade, since basically
Yes,
Grossman came in
yes,
from Hank, right? Malice came in from Hal, but they've been paired together ever since, right?
yes,
Ninth, 10th, 11th, and they've been on a top two line ever since. So they have a lot of experience together.
yes. And it also shouldn't take away though. Hafter does have players that can play very, very big roles for them in this game if things go their way. You should look towards Jacob Wolf and Ethan Olner, who have been line mates also since last season when they were in JV together. Zach Newmark and Zachy Weiss, who's also one of the younger players, two of the younger players, I should say. Newmark's twin, the goaltender of that team. But Zach Newmark's been a good player for them this season. He's worked hard. Same thing with Zach Weiss, who is a freshman coming out of Hafter last season as an eighth grader. They've taken big strides. But like you said, I do think the inexperience is really going to be their biggest downfall in this game. Next year, I wouldn't put it past them to be towards the top of the league, as this year is really more of a learning experience season for them.
Yeah, and I think that's really what they were going for when they decided to merge their JV and varsity teams. They
Right.
said, you know what, like we could give these kids some really good experience and we can make a run next year.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, right, like because you're gonna have Wolf. I believe you're also gonna have Olener. You're gonna
Yep.
have, right, and then Zach and Max are both gonna be,
Moving on.
in 11th grade, and then you have Zachy Weiss, who's very, very good for a ninth grader playing up in varsity, and he
Yep.
gets to go and have a full year, and then you're gonna be in 10th grade. He's gonna be the equivalent of an 11th grader when he's in
Yep.
10th grade. So you're in a pretty good place,
Yeah.
like going into next year. So, they have only good things to look forward to.
Yeah. And moving on, that brings us up to the next matchup. This is also they're all very good matchups, by the way. Like I know I keep saying that, and a lot of these are actually rematches from matchups that happened during the regular season. But this is going to be the first one we're talking about that did not play out during the regular season. It did play out in the preseason tournament, though, and that's between SAR and YDE. This, to me, is, believe it or not, I think the most interesting one. While I say that the other games, like they could be interesting, but I think that you don't actually know which way it's going to go because of certain factors. This is the one where I actually don't know what to make of the situation, and I say that honestly because SAR normally in any day of the week, right? I'd give them the nod over YDE if you heard it just based on namesake. But this year, no one gave YDE a shot. They came in as the 4 seed. Now, don't get me wrong. They've certainly dropped games to teams that, when you look at their record and you see they won 9 games, only lost 4 in regulation, and lost once in overtime, that sure, like it seems a little sketchy. Like they lost to Rambam 8-4, a team that didn't make the playoffs. They lost to you guys. You guys didn't make the playoffs. But then again, they go and beat DRS. They play a close game with Hafter. It's really interesting what this team has become. And again, they weren't, actually not again. We didn't mention this. Not here. I think in previous episodes I've talked about it with Elliot. They were not a team last year due to the vaccination rules, and
Well,
a lot
and
of
that
teams, like there were other teams also involved.
just a shout on that, they also would have been one of the best teams in the league last year. They were
Yes,
they had a
yes,
group
they
of
had
12th
talent.
graders. They had
They
3
had
12th
talent.
graders who were 3 of the best 12th graders in the whole league.
Yeah,
So, and a note on that, one of the ones that graduated, his brother's now in 8th grade in New York, and the kid has 36 goals in middle school.
yeah, it's absurd. And
Franco, unbelievable.
And I remember, a lot of people were questioning this team saying, why DE? Well, they haven't really been good in years past. Like, why are you giving them a shot? And I remember there were people saying, you know what, this team could make the playoffs because we don't know what to expect from them. For all we know, maybe there are incoming, maybe there are transfer students, maybe there was a change in scenery with the coaching staff. I don't know. And shout out to Joey Saft. He's done a fantastic job with that varsity squad. They seem like they've really bought into his philosophy and the way he coaches. I'm not telling you this team is going to win the championship, but for what they've done, it's been a very nice season for them. Now they get to go up against a team that a lot of people, including myself, thought were probably the favorites on paper coming into this season in the SAR Sting. And the biggest thing that comes into play here, the most ironic piece to this whole puzzle right now, is YDE is going to host this game. They are the higher seed. That being said, this is still SAR we're talking about. SAR shouldn't be looked at as the 5th seed and saying, oh, well, they're a bottom 4 seed. Like let's treat them like that. They're the only team that's beaten TABC this year. They've played 2 close games with Frisch. They've gotten points over there. They very well could have beaten DRS. I know that there was some controversy in that game, but that being said, they got a point there. Also despite the fact losing in overtime. And I think when you're looking at this team, you say, well, this is a team that's loaded on paper. They've got Kraus, they've got Fenster, they've got Hand, they've got Doffman, they've got Gazal, Lurie, and Konovich are 2 solid options in net you can go either way with. The biggest piece, ironically enough, I haven't mentioned, is what makes this matchup the most interesting, in my opinion, and that's Gabe Hornblast right now is injured. He's not going to be playing in this game. And so, or it doesn't look like he'll be playing in this game. I don't know, but that's the road it seems we're going down right now. And my question is, he's the heart and soul of that team. So is missing one of their captains, and by the way, there are way more names on that list. I apologize, to individually to those who will see this that I left out, but he's the heart and soul of that team. If he's not there, how much of a wrench does that throw in SAR's game plan to allow them to like go out and just play the way they like to play without their heart and soul there?
It's gonna be really difficult. I can't put it another way. I mean, look,
Yeah,
I already have this game as a very interesting matchup even with him playing because YD is really, really good at home.
yeah.
Like,
That
they
gym is really tough to play in for any
yeah,
visitor.
that's not there's so many different quirks with that gym, whether it's the way that the floor plays, whether it's the fact that if you miss the net high, it's out of play guaranteed. If you wanna clear the ball, you can't clear the ball high because it's so short, it's just gonna go out of play. You have the doors by the wa by if you're on the away bench, the far wall, where it's right at half court, so you can't really tell what's offsides there, and it'll hit and you could clear it, it'll hit that, come right back into play, and then
Yeah,
everybody else has to touch up, and you could have a free shot on net.
yeah,
There's so many different things that come on with that, and not only that, YD's goalie Zaytouni, I mean, he
he-
absolutely stole the game for them in our game. I mean, we had Joe Gindy in front of the net, wide open net, and he just whips out a glove to make a massive save, which would have been the game winner. Um, and through overtime, he was just excellent, really, really excellent. The difference is that SAR really does have a lot of guys who could score, and if they could score early, get a couple of goals, you know,
it could be over.
YD does have the tendency to let up a lot more afterwards.
Right.
Right? Like, you saw that in your game in the beginning of the season, right? Where you guys got a couple of early goals and then it kind of, like, snowballed. If you could get a couple of early goals if you're SAR, then it's big, but I think the other way, right? If you're YD, if it's tight, they've played in a playoff. I'm telling you that the YDE Flatbush game was a playoff game because YD didn't wanna go anywhere and Flatbush wanted to make the playoffs.
Right.
So and it was physical, it was a really, really tough game. So if you're YD, right, if this is a close game through a period, through 2 periods, right, tie game, 1 goal game,
They
and
could
you're
take it.
feeling good, they know how to put away games, and it's not like they don't have guys, like, they
Yeah.
have guys who could play. So, are there holes in YD's game? Yes, there is, they play but they know how to play in their gym, and that's the game where it's gonna be really tight.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to take anything away from SAR without Gabe Hornblast. They're still a very talented team, and I wouldn't put it past them to win this game. But I think that it should be noted they are they're a team to be reckoned with still. With that being said, that brings us on to our final matchup: Hank and Frisch. That game is going to be in Frisch. The two teams met earlier in Hank during the regular season. Frisch went to win that game 3-0. That being said, it could have been more than 3-0. And I think the biggest factor you're looking at in this game is which goaltender is going to perform better. For me, I really believe Joey Diamond might perform better than a guy like Andrew Schwartz, who's been fantastic all season. Don't get me wrong. Um,
Look, I'm gonna jump in there. Strolis is a very good goalie.
he is a very good
Like,
goalie.
he's
But I'm
very good.
looking
Like,
at that team for Hank,
I
and I'm
just think
saying
Joey might be the second best goalie in the
it's
league.
very possible, but I'm
Yeah.
looking at that Hank team and I'm saying, yes, sure. They have solid players. They have very good players. They've got Elliot Hockey as a sophomore tearing it up again. They've got Jordan Gedgerman leading them from the seniors, Judah Ehrenhaus, who's had a strong season. They also have Ellie Schwartz, who stepped up and really just grinded it out. Same with Isaac Goldschmidt, who's had another very strong season, right? But I'm looking at that Frisch team and I'm saying Ethan Alter and Jakey Fight is the most unstoppable line in this varsity league. And it's not a
Yeah.
slight towards anyone else. We already talked about how well, Ryan Brandwine and Eitan Adler play for TABC and how dominant Hornblast and Kraus could be, or Hornblast and Rudman could be for SAR. Fight and Alter are the most dominant line in this varsity league. And I got news for you. In that game, that Frisch beat Hank 3-0. They had all three goals. They combined for all three goals. And the ball was in Hank's zone a lot when they were on the court. So I
It
believe that Frisch will win this game, but I wouldn't put it past Joey Diamond to steal this game either, just
I'll
for
tell
all intents and
the
purposes.
one thing you always have to keep your eye on is Hank knows how to win, and
Yeah,
they win in the playoffs. They beat MTA last year, and
it's
MTA was
true. They did.
really solid last year. And and to be quite frank, LA's hockey is absolute magic. The kid's he's gonna finish with over 100 goals when he's done with varsity. That's all we have to say. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
So when you look at it that way, right, like, and it's not, and Frisch is a stronger team, and right, they have a lot more experience. The championship last year, they are clearly the favorites. I'm not saying anything off of that. Hank's also very young. Hank, right? Like a lot of their players are that 10th grade class, right? It's also Marilis is in 10th grade, and Paulit is in 10th grade, and there are a lot of kids who are very young on that team, and it's going to be really hard to play against Frisch. But at the same time, Jordan Gedgerman knows how to score, right? Isaac Goldschmidt knows how to score, and so if you had to add, right, like if I had to put like money on it, right, going towards Frisch, they're definitely more talented, more experienced, better team, but this isn't like this game doesn't have to be, um, like, if you told me it ended up being 3-1, I would be like, "Okay,
yeah,
sounds about right."
that's a good game. That's still a
Yeah,
good game.
like 3-0, something along last time, but, is there the potential for it to go absolutely crazy the other way also, where it's like where Frisch just goes on a roll? I think that's also entirely possible.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Hank, when they played us, and albeit it wasn't with Joey in net, but we had an absolute field day with their defense. So, you know, it could go one way or the other, but if Hank steps up like they have been, they can make it a good game.
Okay. So just to sort of recap the first round, I think we're pretty much in agreement. TABC over Kushner. We're both going, I'm assuming, Frisch over Hank. We're going SAR. I personally am still gonna go SAR over YDE, but that is again, I think that's the most intriguing matchup here. And I'm going DRS over Hafter. Okay.
So, yeah.
So on that sets us up for the semis. It's a straight bracket, so that would mean we get a rematch of Frisch and DRS in DRS, and that also means that we're going to see TABC going up against SAR, another rematch. Both of those games are going to be hosted by TABC and DRS if they move on. I'm going to cut straight to the chase. If SAR doesn't have Horn Blast back going into
Yeah,
TABC, I think TABC
I'll
has
tell
that
you,
one.
even with Hornblast back, I
That's a
couldn't
tough
see
game,
it.
but I don't want to take away from them.
No, it's not a
Again,
disrespect, it's not a slight. I just think there are really 2 teams in the league, and this year who are just a class above everyone else, and I think we're gonna agree on it. It's gonna be pretty quick, and we're gonna be like, "Okay, it's TABC against Fish."
yeah. Um,
And it's really not a slight on anyone. SAR is a phenomenal team, and, like, they really could come out and go and win the game, like,
yeah, they could,
Hornblast and Kraus could do it to anybody, 2 of the best
right?
players in the league, but, you
But
know?
again, Hornblast not being there may throw a wrench in their plans. And as for the other game, Frisch and DRS, as much as I don't want to, as much as I would not want to take away from what DRS could do, we've already seen this matchup once. We've already seen the same scenario in the same location. Frisch beat DRS 4-0 in DRS. And even if you want to say 4-0 is not such an incredibly big difference, DRS never really had a shot in that game. I was there. Elliot refed that game. We talked about it after. No disrespect to DRS. They're a talented team, but Frisch, I think, is just, they're on
I
another level.
yeah,
It's as simple
I
as that.
Frisch, when they turn it on, is as good as any team in the
Yes.
USC. They really
Yeah.
are. They have 3 guys. They have 3 lines who could score. They have 3 lines who can play defense, and they have, again, one of the best goalies in the league.
Yeah.
So, and it goes, and again, and I have a lot of respect for DRS and everything they've done this year, and and they have really solid squad, but it's just, I'm gonna go towards Frisch.
Alrighty. So that sets up a rematch of last year's championship in varsity between TABC and Frisch. We don't know the location of this game yet, but with that being said, who cares? Let's get right down to it. Last year, we had a very similar scenario where one team during the regular season won both games and won once in regulation and won once in overtime. Last year, that was Frisch, and Frisch completed the sweep, winning the third straight game over TABC in the championship last year. This year, it's the other way around. TABC comes in having been the team that won 2 games over their opponent during the regular season, once in overtime, once in regulation. That being said, this one feels different. I don't know what about it does, but I really wouldn't count Frisch out despite the fact TABC has had their numbers so far this season. And even though, however, that being said, even though I wouldn't count them out, I think TABC is looking for revenge on the highest level possible. I think this is going to be their year winning the league.
I'm gonna go the other way.
Okay.
I I believe in this Frisch squad. I really do.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
they have the they won the championship last year. It's
Yes,
mostly the
they
same
did.
squad. Mostly the same squad. They have the best offense, and I'll tell you, I'm not gonna say, and because I'm not involved in any of these games, I'm not gonna like pick apart like strategy and stuff. But there are certain holes in the TABC defense where if Frisch does jump on it, they could get like
Yeah,
3 or
they
4
could.
goals. And look,
I
and look, Chaim could steal the game. Like so, it's
Yeah,
not like this isn't like a simple. Like, again, I've said this for all of them. It's not simple because the goalies are so good.
yeah,
Like if Chaim decides he's not letting up a goal tonight, you're getting 1 goal at most. Like
right,
right. So, but at the same time, if Frisch decides that they're going to put up 5 on you, they're going to put up 5.
right. You
So
know,
it's a matter. It's really it's just it's a matchup where with the 2 teams I think are clearly the best teams in the league, and I lean towards Frisch even though TABC does have the 2 wins, but I think that gives a little bit more incentive to Frisch.
yeah. Just to share my thoughts real quick, there's really not much. You touched on it all. Chaim's a great goalie, but Ethan Alter and Jakey Fight are, outstanding. And it goes beyond them, obviously. They've got guys like Aryeh Levinson, Ben Strelowitz, and Ellie Knapp, and Aiden Bergita. The list goes on and on. But at the same time, I'm looking at this TABC team, and I think that the 2 things that are going to take it over the top, you've already hit on one of them, that being in the goaltending matchup. Strelowitz is fantastic. I think Chaim Ermelstein's a little bit better, though. That's the first thing. The second thing that comes into play for me is the depth. I think in terms of the actual age and development for TABC has a little bit more experience than that of Frisch. TABC's varsity guys this year that are 11th graders were in the championship as JV players last year, leading that team. I think that's what really does it for me, and I think that's what's going to be the case. So that's where I'm at. And with that being said, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. So we're gonna agree to disagree in the championship matchup, but other than that, I think we're pretty much all. I think we look at everything just about the same way. And once again, I'd like to thank all the viewers for tuning into this episode of Yeshiva League Pass Face-off, and also to our sponsor. Once again, the Weiselberg Law Firm, reminding everyone: choose wisely.